Finally, the most intense fight took place in the Kherson direction. After the Russians attacked the dam, this became the only active direction, and a lot of reports suggest that as a result of heavy airstrikes and ground attacks, the Russians lost Pravdine. The Ukrainian General Staff indirectly confirmed it by reporting that the Russians shelled this town. Pravdine is a very strong fortification, so losing it significantly deteriorates the Russian tactical position. On top of that, over the last several days, the Ukrainians have conducted a lot of missile strikes targeting Russian equipment and manpower concentrations in Chornobivka, Kherson, and the nearby areas. As a result of heavy attacks on the front and missile strikes in the rear, the Russians lost hundreds of soldiers. Many small fortifications were reinforced with the least skilled forces, which are volunteers. Their goal was to just maintain presence in spite of constant air and artillery strikes. As a result, local Russian media sources started to report that many families lost contact with the volunteers and that recruitment centers only state that the volunteers are abroad, which will almost certainly be changed to missing in action. In light of such events, the cases of desertion continue to increase, and now they happen not only on the western bank of the river but also on the eastern. The troops that are assigned to reinforce the western bank know that even if they survive the river crossing under artillery fire, they will unlikely survive by holding a constantly collapsing front line. That is why a lot of them are fleeing in the direction of Crimea. Russian forces in the rear are already intensifying air patrols over Babankivka Drua to catch and prosecute Russian deserters. Overall, the Ukrainians will for sure continue having the upper hand in the short term because Russian mobilization will take months. If you are against the invasion of Ukraine and want to support the work that I am doing, consider making a purchase in the online store UA Supporter. Here you can find a lot of products with Ukrainian symbols, to not only show your support for this channel, but also for Ukraine. While the Russians are trying to mobilize their population to reinforce the fronts in the long term, Russian forces that are already fighting continue to slowly back down. Right now the situation is the worst for the Russians in the Kherson region. The main reason the situation is so harsh for the Russians here is that their ground lines of communication have been disrupted for months. When it comes to the Ukrainian attacks, in the Dudchany direction, the Russians attempted to advance on Novovoznesenske, but the attack group was rather weak and quickly repelled. Russian advances towards Ivanivka has also ended, and now the Russians are preparing to defend against the next wave of assaults. Judging by the more or less even accumulation of Ukrainian forces along the northern front line, the Ukrainians are going to create at least 3 lines of attack: Arkhanhelske, Kostyrka, and Novovoskresenske. In anticipation of the attack, the Russians have increased their engagement of aerial reconnaissance, as the Ukrainian Command reported shooting down Russian drones from Kortyrka to Novodmytrivka. In the Novovoznesenske direction, the Russians reportedly lost control over Ivanivka. Previously I reported that there was some back and forth. First, the Ukrainians entered this village, then after the Russians destroyed the dam, the Ukrainians were forced to leave it, but now many sources suggest that they returned control back. This is very good news because this way, the Ukrainians can protect their flanks much better. The Russians attempted a platoon-sized attack in the direction of Bilohorka but were quickly turned back by Ukrainian artillery. It seems like it was a combat reconnaissance because as the water level decreases, the probability that the Ukrainians will finally launch their attack on Davydiv Brid is increasing. In my previous report, I told you that the Ukrainians started to heavily shell Davydiv Brid, which strongly indicates that they plan to attack very soon. This shelling still continues, which suggests that the Russian defense is likely severely compromised.